Hello, welcome to Remixing the Rainbow. I'm Shaughnessy Miller. I'm on the Bronx Book Festival team, and I'm thrilled to be introducing this panel. This panel is put together by Patrice Caldwell. Patrice Caldwell is a graduate of Wellesley College and the founder and fundraising chair of People of Color in Publishing, a grassroots organization dedicated to supporting, empowering, and uplifting racially and ethnically marginalized members of the book publishing industry. Born and raised in Texas, Patrice was a children's book editor before shifting to be a literary agent at Howard Morhaime Literary Agency. She's been named a Publishers Weekly Star Watch honoree and featured on Bustle's inaugural Lit List as one of 10 women changing the book world. Patrice is the editor of A Phoenix First Must Burn, 16 Stories of Black Girl Magic, Resistance, and Hope by Penguin Random House 2020. Visit Patrice online at patricecaldwell.com, Twitter at Whimsically Yours, and Instagram at Whimsical Aquarian. And now I'm going to turn it over to Patrice.
Hi, everyone. So I am here today to moderate this amazing panel. It's called Remixing the Rainbow. It's going to be a bunch of queer POC authors talking about their books and themselves and craft and all those fun things. So as Shaughnessy said, thank you for that introduction, by the way. I'm Patrice Caldwell. I'm the editor of A Phoenix First Must Burn, and I'm the founder of People of Color in Publishing, and I'm a literary agent. So I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves and just tell them like a little, basically, elevator pitch for your book, and then we'll go from there. So Dhonielle, do we want to start?
Of course you would make me go first. So that's great. My name is Dhonielle Clayton, and I am the author of the Tiny Pretty Things series, which is soon to hit Netflix coming this fall. And then also the author of the Belle series. And I've got the second book hiding above my shoulder called The Everlasting Rose. My elevator pitch is if you've read Scott Westerfeld's Uglies, it's like Scott Westerfeld's Uglies meets Marie Antoinette's court, set in a world where everyone is born looking a little strange, but there are these women called the Belles that can change you down to your bones for the right price.
That's amazing. Love it. All right, Arvin.
Hello.
I love the roast.
I'm Arvin Ahmadi. I'm the author of Down and Across and Girl Gone Viral. Right here.
That handiness.
Yeah. Unfortunately, just the arcs, but that's what I keep on my shelf. And How It All Blew Up, which comes out in September. How It All Blew Up is about an 18-year-old boy, Amir Azadi, who is gay and Iranian. Amir runs away one summer to Rome, where he has an incredible Italian adventure. He meets other queer people who are just like him. He eats his body weight in pasta. He goes on dates in the Sistine Chapel. But all of this ends abruptly, and you meet him on page 1 in an airport interrogation room, where he has to tell the whole story of his summer to the officer, while his mom, dad, and sister are in the rooms next door telling their side of the story.
Love it. Love it. Aiden, your turn.
Hi, I'm Aiden Thomas. I'm author of Cemetery Boys, which is about a trans boy who's determined to prove his gender to his traditional Latinx family. He lives in a community of brujaks. And so in order to try to prove himself as a brujo, he goes out to summon the spirit of his cousin who recently just died, but ends up summoning the wrong spirit. And it devolves into a murder mystery adventure. And then he gets a crush on, the ghost because, yes, we support paranormal romance in this house.
We're here for ghost boning. I'm so sorry. George, it's your turn.
Hey everyone, I'm George M. Johnson. I'm the author of All Boys Aren't Blue, which is my debut young adult Black queer memoir talking about my life age 5 to age 21 and my journey through queerness in a loving and affirming Black family that, although they loved and affirmed me, weren't able to stop the things that society and the structures that society still had up against a young, effeminate Black boy.
All right, that was amazing. Thank you, everyone. So, George, I want you to start us off talking about, I'd love to know, how do you write nonfiction? obviously that's a massive question. What I'm more looking for is, so you're taking things from your own life, and I'm curious how do you feel like there's this like barrier? Is it hard for you to talk about these things? As in, are you worried about how people in your family might react? Because I think all of us as queer people of color, when you're writing fiction, you're definitely worried because, like, of course, a lot of times you're pulling from your own life or people you know, but it's different from actually writing nonfiction. So talk to me kind of about how you handled that with care, or if you were just like, you know what, I don't care, I'm just doing my thing.
So yeah, part of me didn't care, and I just it's my story, so I get to tell it how I want to tell it.
Yeah.
But part of me did care, and so like I did talk with. There's a part in the book that talks about molestation, and that was something that I knew that my mom, my dad, and my aunts hadn't known about, and so I did talk to them first about it because it was going to discuss a deceased family member. And so I didn't talk to them about approval. I just talked to them. I didn't like the world finding out at the same time my family found out certain things. Nonfiction is really hard because your body like relives everything you're telling. So I was talking about every single moment, like my body, I could feel like it almost, your mind for some reason puts you back in that time, and your mind starts to go through whatever it was doing at that time. So you kind of have to like take time to step away from it. A lot of times. And the third thing that's tough about it is like, sometimes you're using language from 30 years ago.
Right.
And because I was like, for instance, there's a chapter where I write about my transgender cousin, Hope, and growing up with a transgender cousin and using like her dead name, using like language from years ago. But because the book is YA, I felt it was still necessary to teach at the same time. So you kind of run into like this, well, I know the language now is this. However, if there is someone struggling with their identity, it's even more important that I lay it bare and make the mistake and say what the mistakes were and say how it looked. And so I think that's part of the journey with nonfiction that could be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, did you feel like you had to overly explain things for white people, or did you feel like you were explaining things for like Black teens?
So far, I've only been explaining things to Black people. Like, I'm not even going to give the energy to explain it to somebody who's not Black. And that's just a politic, abolition politic that I have as an activist. Like, I'm not censoring. Like Toni Morrison told us too many times not to censor. So it's like, for me to waste time censoring someone that this book is not even for, it's like,
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's just like, it's pointless. Yeah, that's like, and I guess I'm curious also, like, do you feel like you had to do like any sort of like trips or anything like that in order to remember things? Like, was it like talking to a lot of relatives, or did everything just like come instantly?
Everything was pretty good for me because I'm from Plainfield, New Jersey. Like, I live in Newark right now. And so I was writing the book in Brooklyn, but I was traveling home like every week and stuff. So I was literally in the same houses that I grew up in, writing the book. My experience in these houses. So it was actually really, really, I guess, healing in a way.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. That's amazing. I love that. So I guess, speaking of healing books, Arvin, I would love for you to talk more about how it all blew up. I think that you talked to me a lot about how this book was like cathartic for you in all these different ways, because this is your first book, for everyone who doesn't know. This is your first book with a gay, Iranian, Muslim character. So this is your first book that you're writing. Your third book overall, but your first published book that is like directly pulling from your identity. Like, why did you do it? Why now?
Originally, at one point, the book was called Out with a Bang because I kind of felt like the only reason that I was writing it was to finally not feel ashamed of this part of me. And I think it's because even though it came out when I was 18, I still recognized that there was a part that felt so afraid and guarded and closed in. And so I wanted to truly come out with the bang. Then later the title became Amir Drops a Bomb because I hated the double standards of like, if it was Chris drops a bomb, you'd be like, oh, this has a big secret. But with Amir Drops a Bomb, your mind goes a certain place. But then I thought, okay, let's not fuck with the title, and I'll just talk about that double standard on panels. So, back to your question, It was important for me because I really felt like I was never going to publicly talk about, I was out to my family, I was out to my friends, but I didn't think I would ever write a gay book until I was like married and like, until I had to, seriously. And it wasn't until I was, as you know, I was in Rome that summer. And my very first weekend, I met this, other queer Iranian who's half Iranian, half Mexican, extremely just like larger than life, brilliant, like never went to college, but knew more about like Iranian history, Persian history than anyone I knew. And so like, just like this total character. And he basically became my best friend that summer and brought me that much closer to both of those identities, my queerness and my Iranianness in a way that I didn't know could coexist. So that's when I knew that I wanted to write Amir, and kind of pay respect to him and kind of the group of queer people that he pulled me into that summer. And, I that's the thing. I'm so proud of this book already because it's, I think, done so much for me just that I can be on a panel like this and feel like my heart is thumping out of my chest, I think even just responding to, a tweet or, like a year or two ago, just kind of acknowledging it in the smallest ways would freak me out. I hated that, and I thought about that a lot. So I think it's just been freeing is probably the one word to describe what it's meant for my own queer journey.
I love that so much. And I think it's interesting because your book is like between this like linear story that goes, well, linear, right? So it's like linear story that goes this way. And then also it's peppered between all these interrogation room scenes, right? So it's like, and I guess that's kind of, ballsy to like have, you're writing about a queer Iranian Muslim kid, and then he's also like in an interrogation room, in the TSA interrogation room, right? So, and I know from obviously being your friend, like that's something that scared some people off, that they were like, oh, we cannot have this book with this, like, it's not funny to be like, ha ha ha, Muslim kid in the interrogation room, right?
Yeah.
What was it like balancing that, like as a narrative from a craft level, right? So you had to balance both of those while also obviously trying to be sensitive to other queer Muslim readers who might read this.
Totally, exactly. I mean, it was important to me from the start. I knew that, I feel like with every book, I'm willing to kill my darlings more and more. But this was like the one darling that I was not willing to kind of like get away with or get rid of because it was what balanced, my experience as a queer Iranian person isn't just that summer in Rome. It's not it's not just the kind of like lighthearted, humorous, fluffy romances and hanging out with other queer people, the same way that it's not just my pain and my coming out and kind of like coming to terms with who I am.
Right.
It's the pain and the pleasure. So it did take some fine tuning. When I first wrote the book, I wrote it entirely as a dramatic monologue. And it was partly because I had read this other book that was written in that style. So the whole thing I wrote from Mir's perspective as spoken to the officer. And eventually I split it up so that I created a distance between those past, fun, whimsical romances and the present tense interrogation room scenes. But I didn't want to keep some of the monologue style just because that's so important in Amir's journey where he feels like in being queer, that takes away from his Iranianness. It means that he's not allowed to participate in his culture. And he's always kind of in his mind had stereotyped as, homophobic and when in actuality, his coming out and deciding this is who I am and I'm going to, even after kind of all of the traumas of this, like I'm going to be me, that strength is actually the most Iranian thing that he can do. And in telling his story, he's participating in the oral tradition of storytelling that's been going on in Persian culture for centuries, for and so he doesn't realize as he's kind of talking in this interrogation room how authentically Persian he's being. So
I love that. That is so amazing.
Yeah. And it's so it was really, really important for me to have that balance of light and dark, of past and present, because it encapsulates the whole experience.
And you started with the interrogation room and then you went back and added all the other things. So you wrote them kind of separately then, I guess.
I wrote them together first and then I made sure split it all up. Like I kind of, I peeled off the Rome bits of the monologue and made them their own kind of standalone scenes. And that became, the past, like 27 days ago, 26, 25 days ago style.
That makes sense. Okay, that's cool. Oh, cool. So Aiden, I love your book so much. is just so fun. And I think as someone who's been a paranormal fan forever, I love that there are all these like traditional things. I mean, like, it's literally like the trope is like, it's like a ghost romance, right? So there's all these like traditional paranormal head nods, but then also, I mean, the heart of the story is like, you have this Latinx teen who's trying to prove to his family that he belongs in their culture, right? And that's actually like a very serious undertone because it's a conservative family. And they don't believe that he can be what he wants to be in this family, right? I guess I'm really curious. First of all, like, how did you even come up with this idea? Because it's like bonkers amazing. But then I guess also just like, how did you go about when you started writing? Were you just like, this is the story, I'm gonna write it? And then were people like super receptive to it? And I ask that because, I try not to, when we talk about identity and stuff. But also, and I do feel that it's interesting because your book is, I think, one of the first trans books. It's one of the few trans books by someone of color, by a major publisher, and definitely the first paranormal one, right? So yeah. I think that's like pretty impressive. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? And I think when I first started writing the book, I didn't really know that, and I didn't like realize the scope. Yeah. And then the further I got into it, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty terrifying because I am touching on so many things. It's a lot of firsts, like you said, and I was really scared about messing it up and doing it wrong, right, and hurting someone within my community. As an author, that's the worst case scenario for me. Is putting something on the page that would harm one of my readers, especially young readers. So kind of when it came to writing this book, kind of to backtrack. So the idea actually came from a Tumblr post that I saw. I follow a bunch of like writing prompt Tumblrs, and the prompt was one sentence. It was, what if you summoned a ghost and then you couldn't get rid of them? And I was like, yeah. I was like,
it's funny because I feel like your version of that is delightful, where else I'd be like, run, burn the house down.
I was like, what if you could? And then like they were cute, and then you're like hanging out for a while.
I love how you're like, what if you decide to make out with a ghost?
I know, right? So like all really fun themes that I explore in that book. And then from there, it's really interesting talking about kind of identity. This was Cemetery Boys was actually my my option book. It's being published first.
I don't know if I knew that, because your other book is coming out next year, right?
It is coming out in late March 2021.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
So this was my option book, and when it came time to pitch it, I sent my editor a bunch of ideas. I think I did 5. The first one, I had like 550K written already, and I was like, here's an outline, here's character motivations. And then like the second one was like, oh, here's like a full synopsis. And then it kind of like trickled down, and then Cemetery Boys was the last one. It was a paragraph long, and I want to say every sentence except for one ended in a question mark. Because I wasn't sure what I was doing, but also like a really interesting.
Is he a ghost?
Yeah, right. So, well, here's the thing. Like what Arvin was talking about, feeling like you can write about your own identity. My first book that I wrote, that I sold, it's white and it's straight. And when it came time to pitch this very brown Latinx queer book, it was me asking permission to be able to write it. I was like, well, maybe I was thinking that the main character could be trans, and I was thinking like it could be steeped in Latinx tradition and kind of really cultural. And so looking back on that now, it's really interesting that I, as a queer person of color, was reaching out to my publishing person and being like, am I allowed to write this? Can I write this? So that was an interesting thing that I didn't even notice like in the moment. But when it comes to the story in general, it's all kind of steeped around Dia de Muertos, right? All of the magic system that I came up with, it's all rooted in that cultural holiday, my favorite personal holiday. So writing the book was very near and dear to my heart. And kind of coming up with all the concepts and everything, it was really fun because like literally everything is tied into the Latinx culture and experience. So that was it was very exciting, but also terrifying.
No, I think that's amazing. And I feel like the passion shows, right? And that's what's so clear in all of you guys' work. Like, I think it's like your passion shows so clearly. And even when you're like promoting it online, I mean, I feel like it's just like full on passion. And I always see people like, I feel like every one of your tweets have like thousands of likes, because I feel like everyone, it's like the energy is so infectious, right? Every time you're talking about this book, it's so clear. You're like, I'm obsessed with this idea.
Yeah.
So this is the one that came out first.
Yeah. Like I'm obsessed and I'm excited. I'm like, anytime anything happens, it blows my mind. Like every time there's any kind of like accolade or acknowledgement, I'm like,
that's great.
I'm like, people know that I exist and that this is a book and like readers are connecting with it. Like every time I'm just like beside myself with joy.
I love it. So now we're going to go to the person who is our wizened, experienced. Oh my gosh, what is that based on? Sherry knows. Okay, so Dhonielle, I could ask you about one of your books, but I actually feel like what I'm more interested in knowing is, okay, so you started out with Tiny Pretty Things. That's co-written, okay? And then you have The Bells, which is your own series. And I know you have some other things that are co-written and separate. You have The Rumor Gang coming out, which is co-written. And then I won't mention the other things that are just yours or collaborations. I guess I'm curious, because I think everyone kind of wants to do this thing now where they're like writing in all these different genres and living around. Like when you started, did you know what you wanted to do? And you also have, you have a packager. Like, did you know you wanted to do all of this together? I mean, I know the answer to this, and did you decide like, no, I'm just going to do this YA duology, and then I'm going to do this next, and then I'm going to do this next. How was it? What was the thought behind it? If there was like a strategy to it?
I'm very strategic and I'm very ambitious. So when I came into the business, it took me about 8 books in order to break in, 8 fully written books for someone to say yes. And I purposefully came in the way that I did because I wanted to show publishers, here's a way to write about kids of color and queer kids without it being centered around pain. Here's a way to have stories that are just about, my first book is about 3 ballerinas who want to be the best and they're willing to do whatever it takes. Yes, they all come from different backgrounds for various different ways, right? However, it is just a story about ambition and about ballet, right? The Bells is a fantasy world that is just interrogating, is there power in the way that you look? And do people treat you differently based on your parts? And I wanted to just interrogate that without having to be pigeonholed in the way that a lot of our stories get.
Right. I mean, I think that's great. The Bells is not... No one's like, oh yeah, this is like this Black fantasy, right? It's just like, no, it's like, it's a book about beauty, which is a book about beauty, remarkable for a Black author. Which
is a book about, the fact that in my world, the most beautiful people have Black, dark skin that look like the night sky, and everybody wants that skin. So therefore, they're chasing these sort of elements of Blackness, because also I feel like people always wanted to look like Black women, but they don't want to be Black women. So I wanted to comment on that and how people were literally going under the knife trying to copy, but they don't get to have the social ramifications of living in a Black body. But I also wanted to also create a fantasy landscape where being queer was just there. It was not villainized. It was part, you should be queer. Everybody, the queen literally has a husband, but she has her beloved, which is essentially her wife. So, and that is the primary relationship, and that is the primary sort of goal. So I wanted to do that too, where nothing was victimized, because I'm tired of that. And I got tired of seeing all of the stories that featured characters who looked like me and characters who looked like people I love being about sad topics. And yes, we need those things. We absolutely do. But I was a librarian for many years. That's why I write. I'm only a writer because I was a reader, and I was in service of children in East Harlem in a charter school, trying to get them to love reading. And it was really hard. So I wanted to create books that were joyful experiences. And they had the tough stuff, but they also had the cupcake stuff, which I think is just as important, is softness too. So that's why I do what I do. And I've strategized to think through how to capitalize my brand in a way that invites lots of different kinds of people to be able to participate, and also so that I can send the elevator back down. I'm here to make sure that I'm with my people and bringing them along. That's the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
It's lonely once you get across the threshold. Yeah. I don't want to be in here by myself. So that's been my main focus from the beginning.
Yeah, well, then also you get used as the person who's like, oh, this is our Black person over here. Like,
right. And then I get to become the token. But I think the responsibility of the token is to send the elevator back down so that we defeat the idea of the token, because I hate it. I don't like being the only one. It's lonely in there. I was a Black kid who grew up in a white school, the fly in the milk. Over that, been over that for a long time. And so I'm just really interested in making sure that all of our kids have something to read, something that makes them want to also tell their stories and feel like they belong.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that, like, I feel like the work you're doing in all these different areas is making sure kids have something to read, right? Whether it's with your own work or it's what you're doing with Cake, which is a packager that's working to develop books that are diverse, that are the commercial books that people can read, that are like, yeah, this is just like a girl who's like a fairy. I don't know why I randomly said that. And like, but she's also Black, right?
Exactly.
When it comes to film and TV, was that something from the beginning you had a really strong interest, like you wanted, because I know you have a lot of things in the works. And so like, was that something you wanted from the beginning? Was that something like, did you in any way create books with like entertainment in mind?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I argue with some very literary high-minded friends all the time about this. I commercially create ideas and worlds and books that can be translated to the screen because I want to see it. I wanted my students to be able to engage with media that reflected them and be able to read and also converse with, like, oh my gosh, now it's a translation of the work. So I purposely did that on, when I was thinking about it, when I was building the World of the Bells, I was like, I just wanted to see a world where being Black and being queer, being brown, it's not victimized. Like, literally, it's celebrated. The fashion world and the beauty world is a place of celebration. And I felt like it needs to be filled with Black and brown and queer bodies. So I'm doing that on purpose so that there's no excuse. Hollywood is looking to adapt projects. Here we go. No excuse. We have the projects ready for you. Now it's about, can you deliver without translating them and whitewashing them and straight washing them and just taking everything out.
It's like not, exactly that. So I guess I would love to know, what is the writing advice you would give someone, I guess, in your shoes, like, whatever, forever ago, whenever you started out, all of you, what is the writing advice and tip that you would give? Like, what is the one thing you feel you would say to people? If someone asked you for advice.
Out of the hot seat. I'm not going first.
Okay, but and I mean specifically doing what you do. So like, George, I'll pick you first.
Pick on George.
If someone's like, yo, I think you're amazing, you're an activist and you're writing nonfiction, like, I want to be like you. What do you say to people? What's the advice?
Well, I never tell anybody to be an activist. Activism is not a job. I mean, it's work, but it is not like, there are people who become career activists, and that's a problem. That's a whole nother panel.
No, but I agree with you.
I am not a career activist. I do a lot of activism, but I'm not a career activist. But in terms of writing, I get that question a lot. And so I always tell them, like, nobody can read a book that you don't write. So at some point, you just have to sit down and write, and not to worry so much about like structure, not to even worry about so much about like chapter selection or any of those things. Like, whatever that idea is, just dump. And then once you dump, you start to separate the pieces. And then you can kind of like start to formulate where you want your story to go. That's probably the advice. I mean, that's the advice that I give most people, because my book just came out, and now it's Pride Month, and it's buzzy, and everybody's like, oh, I want to write a book. That's the first question you get for everybody is like, oh, I want to write a book, or I always want to write a book. It's like, okay. But yeah, I always just push people to, if you really do want to write, because and I was a journalist before I started becoming an author. And my best friend told me to write. Like when I first told him that same thing 6 years ago, his response was, well, write. And so I did. And from there, it just grew and grew and grew. So I always tell everybody, like, you have to, at some point, just stop the questions and the talking and everything else, and you just have to write.
You made it, George. You made it. So now you gotta take everybody.
And we got an announcement about to come out, and that's what it's
we do.
That's when it's gonna get real funky.
You about to get it. You better shut your email off your website.
You can the person who let me stop.
Exactly.
And I also relate to Dhonielle because I write stories in a way with the thought of them being adapted.
Yeah.
So and Terrell Alvin McCraney, who did Moonlight, was who actually told me to do that before I wrote All Boys Aren't Blue. When I talked to him about it, he was like, you have to think about what's next. Like, you already got the book gonna be done. He was like, what are you doing after the book? And I need to write the book. And so I also tell people that, like, don't think about it as like this isolated project. Think about like what is that next thing? Is it TV? Is it a play? Is it a whatever?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I want us to think about that.
Well, it's a bigger industry. So much of our industry is like, if you want to make money as a creator, you do have to kind of have like your, you have to be doing a lot of different things,
I would tell someone I wish I wasn't so afraid at first. I was so terrified of being truthful in my work because you think about reviews, you think about the haters, you think about just pleasing people. And I think that when you grow up in this country, especially I'm thinking about myself as a Black woman, I am trained to please and to be polite and pleasant. And that is supposed to open up doors for me. And I wish that I had entered into my rage a lot earlier along the program. I think that I would have done a lot less apologizing and I would have been a lot more open about who I am, what I stand for. And I would have taken that wig fully off. But I really feel like our industry in particular likes us to do a tap dance. And I'm hoping that the next generation of content creators stops with the dance and just comes in unapologetically themselves. No diluting, no, no scrubbing, none of the translation. And just as like, you know what, this is my book. This is me. And there are kids and teens and readers who are like me and need my work. So eat it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what I would want to tell the next one. Like, I was so afraid. It took me so long to just be like, you know what? I'm just going to let it all out.
I love that. That's great.
You know me. You guys really know the real me. I'm trying to behave. I'm trying to behave. I don't want to embarrass myself.
I think it's important to like tell people that, especially, I will say, especially, I have to acknowledge, like, especially like given like the present situation, I think it's like, you have we've reached a point. I feel like when people say that, I was like, have we reached a point? But anyway, we've reached a point where Black people keep getting killed by the police. And so it's like, you have to enter this industry being like, this is my thing, and like putting it on the table, not like, this is my thing. And let me come back and give you another draft. Oh, wait, you know what? I just realized, I think you might not like that part. So I've watered this part down too. And now the character's white. Yeah, no, I agree. Aiden, all right, what's your one piece of advice?
So I think when we talk about kind of writing and what constitutes as like a professional writer and how to like get into the industry, a huge thing is that for some reason, everyone thinks that academia means that you're a good writer. And
the shade. Aiden.
Well,
I'm
like,
just saying,
literary fiction. Like, okay, I guess. Like,
yes, but so many people are like, academia is what establishes whether or not you're, worthy to be in this, whether you're a good enough writer to be here, which is just the biggest amount of BS. Like, the elitism of academia is built on classism and racism. And it's built to keep writers of color and queer writers out of the industry. So that being said, there's so many, when I have writers coming to me who are like, I want to get into publishing, but I am not there yet. How do I become a better writer? There's so many free online resources or writing guides that are so beyond helpful and that have like changed my whole writing and like how I plot out a book. Jessica Brody has an amazing book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Save the Cat, the YA one, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
It's incredible, super helpful. She also has a Udemy course if like reading isn't your
because she breaks it down.
language.
She breaks down like plots like the Hunger Games, stuff like that,
Yes.
right? And she breaks down the beats of it to show structure.
Yeah, so it's that stuff, the like basics that maybe you would potentially learn in academia, but as someone who put themselves through undergrad and graduate school as a first generation college student, spent way too much money on. So there's other resources.
You're like, I'm speaking from experience.
From experience, I can tell you that academia.
Look, run far, far away from Sally Mae. I would say the same thing. Don't let her get you. She got me. Don't let her get you.
She got me.
She got me.
She has me. I have accepted it as my fate. But Jessica Brody has some really great stuff. And again, if reading isn't your learning language, she has videos which were actually exceptionally helpful for me on Udemy. They're constantly on sale. You can get codes really easily online by just Googling it, and you can get that course for like $12. She also has free online resources on her website. So she's a huge person that I'm always shouting about. But that's a big one for me, is that don't let this idea of academia and elitism keep you from your art and from getting your story out, because that's what the system is trying to create.
That's like
my soapbox.
You can tell how we all feel. I'm great. Arvin, what's your advice? Arvin, unmute yourself.
There we go. All right, so like the best writing advice that I got was I heard it on a panel from an editor actually, Cheryl Klein. It was right at the beginning of my career, and it was that revision is all about balancing the author's vision with the reader's needs. And I love that idea, but I would clarify to a younger version of me that the reader's needs does not mean making a book more commercial or making them less uncomfortable or making a certain, just making it kind of like more appealing to the industry for whatever reasons that the industry is like set. It just means making it more digestible, And so one of the things I kind of love that in kind of like the way that I've like progressed and transitioned as an author is that my first drafts are totally reckless because I just want to get the heart of the book on the page, like industry standards and what may or may not be okay or savory be damned. And so, I think at least in like that first draft stage, you have to tell the truth, tell your truth, and tell it as messily and, recklessly and inappropriately as you need to, and then, again, in that like those revision stages of, kind of thinking about like your reader's needs, I really think that you still need to tell your ultimate truth. Even if, because I think like as a POC, like as a queer person in this industry, you are thinking as someone who wants to kind of like make it more commercially later, you are thinking, strategically in certain ways, but and that's what I hope for the next generation, that they don't have to think strategically in those ways, to think that like, oh, like I remember, actually like my summer in Rome when I was talking to my queer Iranian friend, I was telling him about how I just seen Persepolis and I loved Persepolis and the big thing also. And he was like, I hate those movies. And I was like, why? They're like real. They're based on someone's true stories. And he was like, well, those are the true stories that Hollywood has specifically cherry picked. Like if you're going to be an Iranian voice or a Middle Eastern voice, it has to be about revolution or arranged marriage. And that was like a mind-blowing moment for me because I was always like, oh my God, this is like Hollywood actually cares about us. This is diversity. These are our stories. And I never thought to think that it was only like the right stories, right? And so I hate that like we have to be mindful about that as story creators, that even I think that we've already like jumped in huge hurdle to be able to tell our stories and be outspoken and tell them truthfully. But again, as people who kind of want to kind of get into these worlds eventually, like there are little tricks that we have to pull. And I hate that, to kind of like pretend to highlight our pain when the story is actually about, a queer POC's joy. And so Yeah, all that is to say, I hope the next generation can truly just be like reckless and authentic and honest in all of the ways without any of that kind of Slytherin-y strategy going on there. And that reader's needs section of revising only has to apply to like making it digestible. And I totally agree with you, Aiden, on like academia, because that for me was such a turnoff in fiction when I was in high school and college. And it wasn't until I kind of got back into YA that I fell back in love, specifically voicey YA, that I fell back in love with books, because it didn't have to be in that academic, overwritten voice.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So first of all, that was amazing. I'm like processing everything. Before we go into audience questions, I just have a quick question, which is that related to this, and honestly, and if there's not an answer, I think that's also fine. I would love to know a book that you would recommend to someone who similarly wants to write what you're writing, or it doesn't have to be exactly what you're writing, but like, is there something you'd recommend? Like, is there a book that you were like, I read this and it opened my eyes to this thing? Or maybe you were like, there wasn't one and I was like, I'm going to write it. So would love to know who. Arvin, go first.
It's funny, on my last Bronx Book Festival panel, or maybe it was a panel for something else, but I was asked kind of the first book where I really connected with a gay character, and I realized...
you can answer that question, though, because that is an audience question.
Okay. Maybe it was the Bronx Book Festival panel, and it was the same audience.
Maybe it's the same question, which is fine.
Same question, but it was More Happy Than Not. I didn't even realize the More Happy Than Not was the first time that I read and connected to another gay character.
Which is wild, because More Happy Than Not came out, 2014?
2015. Yeah.
2015. That was 5 years ago.
That was 5 years ago. And I still remember, and I guess that's why I have such a visceral memory of it, being in like a restaurant in New York during the summer and like sweating and crying into my bowl of pasta while reading that book. Like that is a very visceral memory that I have. And so, yeah, I would say More Happy Than Not, because it meant the world to me. And it's funny that I realized it on a panel because I've never told Adam that.
Oh my God, that's adorable. He would love it. Dhonielle. Now we're gonna go on a rove.
Rude, calling us out. I'm sitting over here still thinking. I think a book that I really love, that I'm gonna think about a book that I wish that I had when I was a teenager.
Yep.
That would make my process a lot different. And one of our friends, Zurata Cordova, wrote a book called Labyrinth Lost. And it is just super dope. It's the Brooklyn Bruja series. There's witches, there's family, there's ancestral magic, there's going to a portal universe, but also there is a love triangle that is really amazing for me. And it's between our main character and her best friend, who's a girl, and then there's like a shady boy. Always a shady boy, right?
Shady boy.
Like, you should know about those shady boys.
Yeah, when you read that book, you're like, bad.
Bad, right? But like, we do it anyway. So that's another thing. Toxic.
A whole other conversation.
But I love sort of that dynamic and to be able to see it and to recognize that this is a character that loves who she loves, and the way that it ends and who she picks. It was really affirming for me. And I love that she was able to do that and to have that texture of Latinxness. And I'm not Latinx, but I was like, yes, this is what I would have loved to read at 15 and 16. And my journey would have been hastened. I wouldn't have been so secretive. I would have been, you know what I mean? Like, I really do believe that books are vehicles to make us feel safe in the real world. And so having the experience of reading her characters and reading the dilemma and the love story and how she felt about both of her love interests would have made me feel more comfortable thinking about the people that I loved and the people that I was, with in high school. So that is a book that I really treasure.
Yeah, I also feel like that is one that I'm just like, truly, I'm like, should be like, I can see it when I read the series, like I can see it as a TV show, It's just like, there's so much heart and family and the romance. It's all like perfect doses of each element too.
Right.
Yeah, agree. Aiden, tell us about a book. That's the question. I forgot, but I'll be.
So that's a question I get asked a lot, especially kind of like, what's the first book that you read where you saw yourself reflected?
Yeah.
And that's a book that tends, a lot of the time when I'm doing like interviews and stuff, it tends to be asked by someone who is white and cis. And when I first started getting asked those questions, I would kind of panic. I would panic and I would be like, okay, I need to come up with something. What's something? But the truth is that I have not seen myself in a book ever that I have read. I mean, of course, I'm talking traditional publishing. Indie publishing has been ahead of the curve for a very long time. But to what I knew, books that I had access to that I could find out about, I never saw myself in a book ever. I am queer, I am trans, I'm Latinx. I don't exist in a consumable faction for people in the book industry, which I think is a big reason why I also wrote Cemetery Boys, because I had never seen myself, and I didn't want other queer, trans, Latinx kids to be kind of stumbling through books and being like, where's these parts of myself that I can find? Oftentimes we're picking out books where there's like a part of our marginalizations, but when you get so layered up, it's lonely and it's barren. So my answer is that there wasn't a book for me. I had to Frankenstein books together, and that's why. I
knew the answer. I knew this was going to be. I was 99% sure this was going to be your answer, and I still am like trying to not cry, because I didn't like. I think that's so like. I have found books that have pieces of me, but I still think it took too long, and so I'm just like, I'm honest. I knew that, you know, but I think it just sucks that there are kids who don't have books for them. But now you can hand someone who's like, I want to write that. They have your book now, you know.
It's a form of censorship. I truly believe it's a form of censorship to actively eradicate voices and block them from coming in. And I really, truly will say that all the time and make the First Amendment people get real mad and send.
No, they do, and they act like it's something when you say that. They're, you know, because people love to be like, oh, you people of color, like it's so easy for you guys with your marginalizations to get published, and you're literally like, then why is my book the first one?
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. It's pretty wild, and kind of going back to sending the elevator down, right, is what I like to say a lot is that people are like, oh, you're paving the way. And I'm like, I certainly do not want to be that. What I want to be is the one shoving my shoulder in and trying to sneak others in through over the wall, let's say, in order to get into publishing, in order to get past these barriers that are put up to keep us out, to censor us.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's censorship because it's like, you know, we're about to have 50% of the population is like people of color. And then, I mean, like we all know like 50% at least of them are queer. So it's like, you know, it's like what do they have to read? Nothing.
Yeah.
George, what about you? Oh, I also have a similar, I
don't know. I guess I kind of have to echo Aiden a little bit. I probably wouldn't if I haven't had, I wish I was keeping track, but it's got to be over 1,000 at this point, messages, just in this short time from Black queer people, primarily Black gay men, and primarily older Black gay men, 50s and 60s, sending me messages about the book. It's been very enlightening to realize like that we just, it's like the stories always existed, but it's just not there still in a way. Like it's, kind of said, it's in bits and pieces here and there, and it's kind of touched on, but it's like, I guess it's like if I can point to a TV and see that my character still doesn't exist there, then it probably doesn't exist somewhere else, because if it did exist somewhere else, then it would have been optional for TV because they would have loved cherry picking that type of story. So it kind of, you know, kind of speaks to that. Like, it's like if you haven't seen yourself depicted on TV, more likely than not, you might not have seen yourself depicted in a book either. And so I guess that's kind of, in a way, what pushed me to write the story how I ended up writing it, specifically for young adults. I've read tons of adult Black queer memoirs. And that, you know, there's
been like a crop of them recently. I mean, like Michael's and Saeed. Like there's been so you had like Dhonielle Moore, Saeed, and Michael, but then you also had Black men like Kiese and
you have like Jericho and Denez on the poetry side.
Yeah.
Denez is queer, so Jericho's queer too. So you have like queerness on the poetry side, but in the YA spectrum, it's interesting. And again, because I'm doing like all of the LGBT panels for the first time, it's like I'm saying a lot of things that are like first time coming from the experience of a Black queer male presenting.
We don't have, and I also think it's like interesting with this panel because I think Dhonielle, Dhonielle talked about this a lot. Like before, there were like literally 2 years ago, you would go to a queer panel and it'd be like all white people, and you would just like white cis people, and you'd just be like, I don't believe that there are no queer. But then it's like, oh, they're just not getting published, and so it's so if only a couple years ago, most panels were like.
It was Adam, white cis men.
And then, it was also, I mean, Adam talks about it, he's white passing, it's like, but it's literally like one person who counts.
He would be the little chili flake, the little sprinkle of adobo would be him.
And then you're like, everyone else is like, I guess doesn't exist. It's like, yeah, we're just not, and
that's why I never spoke about it, Patrice, honestly, because I was like, they're going to put me on panels with white cis men.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the little brown drop.
Yep.
Who's like, what is happening? And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to relax. I'm going to, until this is this experience I've never had before.
Like a lot of the queer Black women who are authors only came out in the last couple of years. I mean, like everyone knew they were queer, but they like only publicly came out because they were like, oh, there's now 4 of us. We can do a panel together. Like, it's like.
Exactly. And I hate that it feels that way, that I don't want, it's not that I don't want to be put on those panels, but being around white, cis men and their queerness is a very different experience.
Like, oh, my parents loved me from the beginning, and like it was so great to grow up in Idaho. It was really hard for me when I had to move to New York City, and then I found my community even more.
And also there's this like borrowing and loving of Black women's mannerisms and iconography that is irksome. And so when you're on a panel and you see, and someone's like girlfriend and all of that stuff, which is, it gets a little bit much, and I don't want to come out of pocket on a panel. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna sit over here and eat my food and wait.
I mean, no, this is why I only moderate Black queer POC panels, because it's too much otherwise. It's too much. I think we have audience questions. Oh, okay, well, these are kind of okay, I mean, we can, I guess. So we are celebrating Pride Month. Yes, it's Pride Month. It's honestly, I feel like I think with everything going on, I'm like, oh, right, it's Pride. There's no Pride Festival, so it doesn't really feel like Pride Month. But Pride Month is more than just a festival. And I think actually that's the amazing thing about it, is like, I think it's actually more of a time to reflect and actually think about why so much progress has been made and who is to thank for that, which is oftentimes Black trans women, but okay. And then we have, can you recommend queer authors of color whose books we can buy and boost during this month especially?
I love Anne-Marie McLemore. I am a stan for their work. I will fight anybody for them. They write the most beautiful, romantic, luxe, magical, realist, like fairy tales. It's everything that I wanted as a reader. Just
so deep in culture, queer characters everywhere.
Everywhere. Every love interest that Anne-Marie McLemore writes is this like beautiful, lovely trans boy that you fall in love with, that you're obsessed with. Like, they do such a fabulous job. So I'm a stan for them. We debuted together. Every book that Anne-Marie McLemore comes out with is like auto purchase. I buy it. I savor it like chocolate. Read their entire canon.
Yeah. I mean, also I did a panel with them and I was like, oh my God, because it's weird when you know someone for so long and you're like, you have a canon out, dude. Like, I was like, you have like 5, like you have a body of work. Yeah.
Writing in that tradition, like just steeped in Latinx magical realism, like literally keeping that alive. I feel like bringing it to a new audience. So talented. So talented. Sure. They're going to be mad at me for that because I just went in.
No, I mean, come on. That's like the biggest compliment.
Right.
George, who would you recommend? What are books that you're like, okay, these are the people need to be reading? It doesn't have to just be YA. I would say.
Yeah, because like I said, I always read books that are like, I guess, not YA. And I already mentioned their names, but Dhonielle Smith has a poetry book out called Homie.
Yes.
Which is really called something else.
Yes. Yeah. When I saw the picture, it was like, this is the we're not going to say it, but there's like this. You'll have to like Google it, but you can probably find it. It's like the inside front page, I think it is.
Yeah, because as soon as you open it, it's the name of the book is, and so I thought that was extremely clever. But it's an amazing poetry book that talks about like Dhonelle's blackness and queerness, as well as their journey through HIV. Which I think is important because that's something that Black LGBTQ people deal with at much higher rates than everyone else. I guess another book, even though I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited to, would be Clayton Alexander's Felix Ever After. I think it debuted like a week after mine, and so it's like really, really nice to always see like these two books with like these flower crowns popping up, like side by side on all of these websites and then all of these like reviews and everything. So I think that's really, really cool.
Okay.
So yeah.
Arvin.
Yeah.
I just realized that. I don't even think I realized that both of you have like these like flowery crown books. That's pretty, like a little micro trend, but like totally separate timelines.
Yeah. It is. And Aiden, didn't you on Clayton's pub date like recreate the cover, right? With your own work?
Yeah. I ventured out to like the store during quarantine, and I was like, I need flowers. I like grabbed a bunch.
That is dedication. We stand the stan. Yeah. So I'm gonna shout out two books. I'm gonna shout out Abdul Nazemian's Like a Love Story. It came out last year. It's out in paperback now, and it's a beautiful story told in 3 POVs of this like gay Iranian boy in the 90s. And it's like it's basically his ode to like Madonna and ACT UP. Like the boy basically goes to a lot of like ACT UP meetings and kind of like learns about activism and kind of and becomes involved in that fight in the 90s while coming to terms with his own gay Iranianness. And then Darius the Great is Not Okay. Yes. It's an amazing book, but I just finished reading the sequel.
The sequel's even better.
Even better. It's oh my God. And there's such different books, even though they're both so authentically Darius. I mean, like if you're looking for a voice that'll just blow your mind that you won't want to stop, that you'll I think Becky Albertalli described it as like, I could live in this book forever. And it's true. The voice is just that.
Well, it's also just so deeply like rooted. Again, I think all of these recommendations rooted in culture, so queer, so dealing with like mental health issues, like
yeah. And the second book is all of that too, but it also gets really sex positive because Darius is now like he has a boyfriend now and is caught up in this love triangle, but then also is like dealing with kind of what he is and isn't comfortable with in terms of an Adib. It's funny because the book I think is so like it's people talk about clean YA, which is such BS. Like this, I think we're not even going to get into that conversation. But I do think it's like sex positive in a really kind of like talking about consent and talking about communication and like communicating what you are and aren't comfortable with, and talking to your parents. Like it just I think it deals with that part of the kind of like coming out and coming to terms with your queerness process so well.
So important. I agree. Dhonielle and Aiden, you haven't gone yet, right? Yes.
I already went. I said Anne Marie McLemore.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Okay. Okay, sounds good. And then Aiden.
Yeah, so I was going to boost Felix Ever After. I'm halfway through it right now.
George, you need to jump off now. You're muted.
Sorry. So I actually have I'm talking with the Bay of Rustin Center tonight, especially with everything going on, and Trump is about to make an announcement, and so I guess
is he?
Yeah, so I need to get myself fully prepared before I talk to the social justice.
Okay, we're gonna say goodbye to George. That way.
I need to get prepared.
Love you, George.
Bye. Bye, George's book.
Love your book.
Oh wow, the screen! I was like not ready for the screen.
I've changed things up.
Okay, Aiden. So sorry. Please continue.
No worries.
What were you saying about
talking about Felix, right?
Felix Ever After. Season calendar. I know George already talked about it, but I'm
never enough love.
Yes, I'm obsessed with Clayton. Clayton's incredible. And Felix Ever After is really, yes, it's wonderful. A lot of the times trans rep, when it's not written by a trans person, can be not great. So it's been really
on it.
so it's been very wonderful to have Felix Ever After enter my life. It's been wonderful. I highly recommend it. Another book that I would really like to boost, even though I haven't read it yet, is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. And that's actually coming out June 2nd. So for us time tomorrow. Yeah. I am so excited for that book. The cover is gorgeous. And it's the first in a fantasy duology inspired by West African folklore. So again, kind of talking about things that are steeped in culture. I am beyond excited for that, to get my grubby mitts on that book.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so this has been amazing. In closing, I would love for you just to say, final words, and then we're gonna wrap up. So does anyone have any final things they want to say? Aiden, you first, and then Dhonielle, and then Arvin. So now you know the order in advance.
So rude. You're a tyrant on this panel, Patrice.
Being honest.
It's easier to read social cues when you're you can feel them about to talk and stuff when you're in person. So I have to be a tyrant.
That's true. Things to say in closing. I don't know. This was the coolest panel to be on. Cemetery Boys comes out September 1st.
Yeah, that's a thing to say.
That's very exciting.
So tell me, Cemetery Boys is standalone? Are you going to write more in the universe? Like what? I'm trying to fish. Like what?
I don't know what you're talking about or implying. That's really strange. Cemetery Boys is a standalone as of right now.
Okay, great.
Who knows what the future holds? I'm sure very exciting stuff that will take forever for me to share with you guys. So that's the name of the game.
Thanks for breaking my heart. It's fine. Continue. All right, so Cemetery Boys out. When's the date again?
September 1st.
September 1st. Okay, great. And as you can see, there's a purchase link at the bottom. Go to there and you can purchase the book. Awesome.
Yes, and there's a pre-order campaign. So if you go to Aiden-Thomas, all the info is there. I would love to give you free stuff. So you should enter.
Great, even better. Awesome, thank you. All right, Dhonielle, do that. And then also tell us about your upcoming book.
Okay, I think in closing, I want, since this is Remixing the Rainbow, I want us to make space for all different kinds of stories within this rainbow. And I want us to highlight those of us who have been traditionally silenced. When I look at the canon of YA and children's literature, there's a certain version of the queer story that gets to take the front seat. And I'm ready for brown queer folks. Been ready. I'm also ready to see them in middle grade. And I'm ready to see queer families in picture books and in chapter book series, because we don't just belong in YA, because then it gives a label that there's something salacious and teenage and adolescent about having this identity, when this identity is with us for much
it's like
earlier.
You turn 14 or 15 and you're like, hello.
Right. And I'm like, I've already been in this hello zone for a while now. And so I just really feel like, and I want to challenge queer content creators of color to start thinking of younger ages, to also diversify in their stories. And so Aiden, I need middle grade from you.
We all need middle grade from you.
Arvin, I need middle grade from you. I really need these stories. I'm just out here being a tyrant, saying I need adult. I just need us to think not so small. Yeah. Sometimes we come into this industry and we truly believe that we belong in one little pocket. And I want us to be in all the pockets, because your stories are important. And also people will tell your stories if you don't do it. So I want us to be empowered to do that. I'm really, sort of tired of that. And I don't know. When is my next book coming out? I have books coming out next year. A lot of my stuff has been bumped around because Miss Rona is here. So the rumor game is coming next year. I have a lot of other stuff coming next year that I'm really excited to talk about. But really, I'm just really here to make sure that I'm that fussy auntie that's write all of the stories. Come on, let's go. Let's get busy. Let's get to work.
Aiden mentioned website. What's the best way to keep up to date? Twitter? I guess Twitter for everyone. Twitter for everyone.
I'm really on Instagram at Brown Bookworm, but I am on Twitter at Brown Bookworm. It's a cesspool right now, obviously, on Twitter, just because all MAGA is out and about.
Instagram is like, that's where people will find you for your updates.
Exactly. And then also you can find me on my website, DhonielleClayton.com or CakeLiterary.com. I'm here to answer questions, to help. I'm just really here to send that elevator back down. I really feel like that is my purpose in this industry, is to do that, to make opportunity. So write all the books. You heard me. I said it. Aiden, trust and believe. We've been on a panel now. I just told Marcus Hero, I was like, I'm in love with Aiden. So I'm going to be
Aiden, you also need to know that, like, I'm going to actually warn you, like, when you've got your eyes on you, you're never.
Aiden, I'm going to be in your inbox. Like, where is the
wonderful.
middle grade?
So
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
It's in here.
Where Dhonielle goes to tax.
And I'm like, yes, I'm ready for it.
I was like, yeah, talk to Aiden, not me. I'll be
Yeah, Aiden's like, 1 second.
Arvin, I'm coming for you. Patrice, I've been on you. So yeah.
That's what happened to this panel. I'm moderating.
So I was going to pick my last one. I was going to piggyback off a point that George made, but it's also tied to Dhonielle's point, which is that we talk so much about, I think, like, these books needing to exist. I want them to more than exist. I want them to be accessible. You know, George talked about, like, well, if it's not on TV, then I'm probably not going to find it here. And that made me think, like, oh, but we talk about indie presses. We talk about, and it's like, oh no, but like it's not enough for it just to be published by an indie press, or even, and Patrice, you talk about this all the time, for publisher to be like, we're publishing gay books, we're publishing Black books, we're publishing intersectional books. It's like, but where are the resources?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, George always is like, you read
for years.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's so important, because then it actually gets in front of the right readers. Then it doesn't just exist, it's accessible, it's reaching the people who need it.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. I think it's awesome to be on this panel, because, you know, like, Dhonielle, you are literally doing that with Cake. Actually, both of you, because the first example that comes to mind is Tristan Strong, you know? And I think that's, you know, the Rick Riordan imprint has been amazing, but like Patrice USA.
That was all Dhonielle.
That book, like, exploded, and rightfully so. And
I mean, that is the book for me that's the first book I saw, like, all of my culture in, you know?
Yeah. And you didn't just want that book to exist, Patrice. You want that book to like take the world by storm.
But you also need a publisher that's like, I mean, like you're kind of saying, it's like you need a publisher, you need a Rick Riordan to like really be like, we're not just gonna publish this, because there are a lot of books that like
perfect storm. You know, it's not like your adult, you know, not Beach Read, it wasn't, but like generally, like, you know, you kind of like adult white lady book that it needs to be like picked for the right book club. All of it can be wrong and it'll do well. I think for like a POC intersectional book, it has to be that perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I want to see that for queer love stories. I want to see the biggest, boldest, brownest, like, queer love story that everybody's like, oh my God.
Right.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah, I love the way that you talk about P.S. I Love You. I'm like, where is that? But like queer and just rooted in like queer.
Yeah.
And written by queer people.
And written by queer people. And I think those books will get their due. It's just that the bar is so much higher and everything has to be aligned in a way that kind of your like typical commercial it doesn't. But we're there. We're willing to work twice as hard, do everything, because like these are our identities. These are our actual lives, you know?
I love that. Arvin, tell us about your book. When is it coming out?
Oh yeah. Speaking of my actual life, How It All Blew Up.
Yes, your queer literally has romance, family, all the things we're talking about, and should be a movie. So now that
yeah. And look, I'm gonna fight for this book. Harder than ever. September 22nd, out from Penguin.
Really. And in the UK.
And in the UK from Hotkey.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much. Please buy everyone's books. The link, you've seen it, it's at the bottom. Go buy people's books, follow people on Twitter, Instagram, go to people's websites, sign up, and that's it. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having us. This was amazing.
Fun. All right, bye everyone.